Golden Black Live, Friday, November 6th. And if you're looking for answers on Purdue sports, I hope we can give them. We can't give you a whole lot else on the election front, but we're all trying to be patient on that. But I want to welcome in Brian Neubert and Tom Dienhart. And we've got a lot to discuss today. We're also going to have Nate Barrett will join us in segment 2, and Bobby Buckets Riddell for segment 3. Brian and I will be out with him, and looking forward to that as well, as Bobby will be taking over duties as the color analyst for Purdue men's basketball broadcast. So good show today. I want to thank our sponsors, Triple X, on the hill, but on the level of Purdue tradition since 1929. And then, of course, State Farm agent Trent Johnson. And Trent is myagent.com. I'm even going to change my little virtual background to reflect that. And Hilton Garden Inn, when tomorrow's a big day, State HDI tonight. I don't know whether Trent's got a high school football game tonight. Brian, you are off to Maryville, correct, for a game? Maryville, Lafayette, Jeff, in about as nice a weather as you're ever going to find in Lake County for, I would think, on the 6th of November.
Yeah, I will take it. And this will be my first foray into a different time zone in I don't know how long.
Yeah, okay. Just to tell you, it's 1 o'clock up there right now. So.
I know. But I don't think I've gone any further from home than Indianapolis here in quite a while.
Who are you going to focus on tonight? Obviously,
JoJo Johnson from Merrillville is an athlete that Purdue's recruiting as a cornerback, one of Purdue's remaining 2021 targets. He was a Cincinnati commitment for a long time. He backed out on them a while back. I figured it was probably he was going to flip to Purdue. Michigan State has since offered him. Iowa's since offered him. And I would imagine he'll look at some of those other schools as well. But I would think Purdue would be pretty well positioned, being only an hour and a half down the road. I think that had he not committed so early to Cincinnati, had Purdue offered him first, I assume he would have committed early to Purdue. But we'll kind of see what happens. I don't think Michigan State is to be discounted here either. But I have to think Purdue's a real player for him. So I wanted to take the opportunity to go see him play and, see what he has to say.
Does Jeff have any D1 prospects still? I know they had a couple last year in the defensive line. Does anybody else, not necessarily in Purdue's wheelhouse, but this is a program that has gotten good here in the last 2 or 3 years and gotten pretty competitive.
Yeah, don't ask me for names because I can't remember. Yeah. But they've got some really good-looking linemen. They've got a couple I think they got a kid committed to Cincinnati. They've got some real Division I looking kids on the line of scrimmage. I saw them play their opener against West Lafayette High School, and they look like a real big-time high school football team. They look like a 5A Indianapolis team at the line of scrimmage, and that's typically that lends itself pretty well to having some guys who are going to go on to play college football. They have gotten real good real fast.
Yeah, Tom Dienhart, you were raising your hand. Oh, you better unmute. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Tom. Fire away.
Yeah, the kid going to Cincinnati, his name is Jalen Morrow, who moved down from Chicago to Lafayette area during high school. So, yeah, he's a big-time player. They also have a defensive tackle going to Eastern Michigan, whose brother has played in the NFL too. So, yeah, Brian's right. They had some big-time defensive linemen this year.
All right, the storylines, it is a unintended bye week. Seems kind of strange that we played 2 and then we'll be sitting. But, Tom, obviously the Boilermakers will not be playing Wisconsin. And we've analyzed it on the site about no one's happy about not playing. I think when you only play an 8-game season, that's never a good thing. But understood that there are some possible advantages for Purdue from a standing standpoint. The fact that you don't have to face up against the Badgers could put you in a good position if you take care of business.
Yeah, you would have maybe liked to have played this Wisconsin team, Allen, for a couple reasons. Number one, you likely would have faced their 4th-string quarterback, a guy named Danny Vandenboom. He came right out of the last name Hall of Fame. So, again, they've had issues in their quarterback room with COVID and injuries. And, of course, no fans would be in Camp Randall Stadium either. So always a raucous environment that Purdue would not have to deal with as well. And plus, Purdue's 2-0, guys. They had some momentum as well. I'm sure they would have liked to have kept going, keep that roll continuing as they headed north up to Madison. Of course, it's not going to happen. This was, again, for the second week in a row, guys, a voluntary shutdown by the Wisconsin program. they didn't trigger the automatic shutdown numbers to postpone or cancel this game. They want to try to sit on this virus. The Big Ten has given schools the latitude to shut down if they think it's necessary. Again, Wisconsin now has backed itself into a corner, guys. The league has said you have to play at least 6 Big Ten games to qualify for the championship game for the conference. That means Wisconsin's going to have to play every one of its remaining games to reach that goal. So, again, they have to get their house in order COVID-wise. Again, meanwhile, Purdue, like you said, Allen's off. The pluses are trying to get some players healthy, right? Maybe we'll see Rondale Moore the next time the Boilermakers hit the field November 14th at home versus Northwestern. Of course, Cam Craig is banged up. We haven't seen King Daru yet. George Karlaftis, Sam Garvin. So, again, maybe this extra time off will allow some of those Boilermakers to get back on the field.
Yeah, that's an interesting storyline. Obviously, you know, we watched Brian the first 2 weeks. Purdue's defense, for the most part, I mean, gave up a fair amount of yards, but for the most part, did some pretty good things. Not having George Karlaftis, and depending on how long that is, it's still – you worry about, if at least from my perspective, your ability to get a pass rush, and that was a problem in the second half. Or I thought didn't have a great pass rush against Illinois at all. But how do you view that, Brian? When you look at that defense, it's been the scheme is interesting, and they've done some things certainly from a point of giving up an average of 22 points a game in the first 2 weeks. So certainly a trending in the right direction, I guess, from that standpoint.
Yeah, I think that it's been a mixed bag, but I think it's been more good than bad. I think you've given up a lot of yards. That's okay as long as you're not giving up a lot of points. The defense has come up big when it's needed to. It's forced turnovers deep in Illinois territory. It forced basically the game-winning turnover versus Iowa, and then it closed the door both times when it had to as well. So yards in the grand scheme of things don't matter all that much. You know, we throw the cliche around a lot about, you know, bend but don't break. There's been a lot of bending, but the more important part is the breaking. Now, what happens when you play the better teams on your schedule? Who are those teams, though? You know, I think we would be remiss to not point out the fact Iowa and Illinois are combined 0-4 right now. But I think you have seen more good than bad from this new defense. And I think it's a reasonable assumption to make that they'll get better as time goes on because you have new guys breaking into important roles. Now, the Karlaftis thing's a huge deal, obviously. If he's out, that's a real problem because you can't overstate the importance of having a guy who's a one-man pass rush, who gives you the ability. You know, we talked a lot about the three-man rush in the second half against Illinois, you know, maybe allowing Illinois to have a little bit more success than you would have preferred. Well, that's an entirely different deal if Karlaftis is still on the field because he's the guy who gives you some three-man rush bite. Whereas now, if you don't have him, I don't know if you can afford to do that as much because you're not going to have the ability to get to the quarterback one-on-one quite as much as you would have with Karlaftis. Now, DeMarcus Mitchell's doing some good things as a pass rusher. Derek Barnes, who has put his hand down, here and there in passing situations, whereas he's mostly playing linebacker. He's a proven pass rusher to a certain extent, but you can't overstate what they would be missing if they don't have George Karlaftis for an extended period of time.
Yeah, no question about that. Tom, you obviously look closely at the other teams in the Big Ten. Northwestern, I think we all have a healthy amount of respect for the job that Pat Fitzgerald does. I know the Wildcats were, 3-9 last year, had a disappointing season. They look pretty good, though, in the first 2 weeks, certainly in that win at Maryland and then getting it done in Iowa City. I don't know how much you've scouted them, but, and they have a big game tomorrow at noon against Nebraska. But that's scheduled, Purdue, and you can't get too far ahead of yourself. But my gosh, you could look at it and say of the 5 games left in the schedule, maybe only one that you'll be an underdog of any number, and that might be Indiana. And that's again, a rivalry game, and we'll see where teams are at that point.
Let's go ahead and get ahead of ourselves, Al.
Why not?
That's what we can do in the media, right?
Yeah.
Coaches hate it, but we love it. I think fans enjoy it. You're exactly right. Once this schedule was released, we all looked at it and thought, wow, this is a pretty favorable draw for the Boilermakers. The Big Ten West doesn't have, that 10,000-pound gorilla. And your crossover foes, of course, being Rutgers and Indiana. You like your chances there, right, guys? No fans in the stands. Of course, lessens the fear of going on the road to Wisconsin and to Minnesota. Of course, the Badger game is canceled. And, of course, guys, the Gophers, they look like a shell of themselves, right? 0-2, struggling on defense mightily, I think more than anybody anticipated. And, yeah, here we are with the big game with Northwestern looming, guys, in a week or so. You're right, Alan. Pat Fitzgerald is, you can set your watch by his program typically. Last year was an aberration, I think. They went from the Big Ten title game to last place, and now they look like they're back on track. They're a tough physical team like Pat is. They want to run, set up the pass. They've got, of course, the IU transfer quarterback, Peyton Ramsey. That was a big issue for that team last year, guys. Quarterback play was abysmal. The offense was atrocious. And Pat Fitzgerald, to the delight of Northwestern fans, finally changed his coaching staff. Mick McCall, the offensive coordinator, is out. He brought in Mike Bajakian to run the offense. And again, guys, the early returns have been positive in Evanston. So, I hope the Wildcats can take care of business against the Huskers to set up, 3-0 NU versus 2-0 Purdue, November 14th, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, BTN. What a big game, guys. And I guess I'll throw this at you real quick. When's the last time you think a game of that importance has been played in Ross-Ade Stadium?
Yeah, I mean, it's it's been a while. Maybe 2003 against Iowa, I'm thinking, but I don't know. Brian there might be some others in there.
You can make a case for the opener against Northwestern 2 years ago.
Yeah, that may be.
They put a lot into that game.
I guess you look at one.
A lot of hope coming off the 2017 debut, Brian. You're right. There was a lot of excitement swirling in the air that night. Fun night. Point. Tyler Trent was in the house too. Rondale Moore's debut. That was an electric night.
You've also had a couple games where Purdue's kind of had to win to go to go
bowl
to
games against Indiana. Certainly.
I mean, I don't necessarily know if the suspense of going to a bowl game or not equals this. These two teams potentially being in a position to springboard their season, staying undefeated. But it is a big game for sure.
No question, it's going to be a big one from that standpoint.
Beat Nebraska.
Yeah,
we still don't know if Nebraska's any good.
Yeah, and that game noon tomorrow, it will be one that we'll all be watching and waiting to see where Purdue is from that standpoint as well. Ryan, I want to switch gears a little bit. We got basketball on the brain here as well. Some disappointing news, I guess, from a health standpoint with Ethan Morton's situation and having mono, but got a little bit of time, and maybe he can. You hope he doesn't have a year. And again, this is not I have nothing to base this on, but you hope he can stay as healthy as possible. I know Dakota Mathias always go back and think about his mono, I think, in his freshman year as well. But this is a team that's going to be really interesting to watch. And right now we understand they'll open up against Liberty on November 25th down in Florida. But what's your gut feeling as you start to look at this team right now?
Yeah, I think part of what makes them so interesting is the newcomers. So Ethan Morton being out of that mix right now it's conceivable he can still play November 25th.
Yeah,
he's supposed to be 2 or 3 weeks away here, but it is disappointing because you always worry about that off season or that preseason where you've been limited. You worry about your conditioning, you worry about all the practice time you've missed, you wonder about your ability to kind of hit the ground running. So that's obviously not good news, especially coming off a weird off season period. But I think obviously, as important as the newcomers are, Purdue's veterans have to take this thing by the horns here. Eric Hunter, Travion Williams, Aaron Wheeler, Sasha Stefanovic have to be the solution, not just part of the solution. They have to be the solution. I think the newcomers are all good enough to really help Purdue win right away, but whether or not, they are ready to provide the leadership void, whatever, all that stuff that Purdue was missing last year, the competitiveness, the leadership, all of that stuff has to fall on the example setters. And those guys are, the Eric Hunters, the Travion Williams, the Aaron Wheelers, the Sasha Stefanoviches. And I think it's just really important those guys take everything to another level this year and hope everything, kind of trickles down to everybody else, because Jaden Ivey's going to be a really good college player. Brandon Newman's going to be a really good college player. I think Mason Gillis is going to be a really good college player. Ethan Morton, when he's ready, he's going to be a really good college player. Zach Edey, every indication is he's going to be a pretty good player. the talent is not going to be the issue with this team, nor was it the issue last year. It's all of the other stuff, and that has to come down from the older guys.
Yeah. Hey, Brian, can you give us an idea of when to anticipate a Big Ten schedule and what you think that's going to look like?
Well, it was going to come out late last week and then late this week, and now I'm only assuming it's going to be next week. I mean, the season starts in 3 weeks. The Big Ten season doesn't start obviously until presumably late December at the earliest. But I know it's a pretty big mess to have to deal with. I'm sure they're trying to bake in some flexibility, things like that, but it's got to be next week. I mean, the season, starts in 3 weeks. You'd like to have your schedule nailed down. I know Purdue's non-conference scheduling is pretty much done. It's just not official, not announced, whatever. But I'd have to think the Big Ten part of it has to come down pretty soon, because you'd probably like to at least announce your schedule, a little more than 2 weeks before that schedule's played.
How many games do you think it'll be?
It'll be 7 non-conference games and 20 Big Ten games. It'll be the 27 max.
27.
Okay.
So Purdue will play a non-conference. Liberty, we know that. Then another game down in Florida.
Liberty,
they've got and
then Mississippi State or Clemson. And then you've got Notre Dame in the Crossroads. You've got Miami in the Big Ten ACC. You've got Indiana State and Valpo in Mackey Arena. And I have lost count. There might be one more mid-major non-conference game on the schedule.
Yeah, I don't even know if that's been figured out, but it's out there in terms
Radford,
of
somebody like that.
What's that?
Might be like Radford or Ryder or somebody like that.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the deal is. Not Incarnate Word though. That one got
not that I know of.
That got moved around. So, that will be an interesting storyline, and it will be interesting to see how.
Oh, there's an Ivy League on there too, isn't there?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
They had Yale at one point.
Yeah, I don't know if Yale stuck, because Yale had to back out, and they were originally replaced by Lipscomb, at least tentatively. But I don't know if Lipscomb then got pulled as well. We'll find out soon enough.
Yeah, we will find out soon enough. And Elliot Bloom has been busy. We know that. Purdue's men's basketball director of operations, trying to get that part figured out. And I think that will be a storyline. From that, and then some. One last question for you, Brian. You obviously got a chance to talk to Trey Kaufman, who was on the site, I think, on Tuesday. Just your impressions about him as a kid. I mean, you've seen him obviously, but he really seems to be very mature and ready to go.
Yeah, he's another one of these guys Purdue's bringing in where it's like you're talking to an adult. He's a very mature, very level-headed, very smart sort of guy. And, I don't want to generalize too much about basketball recruits, but you don't always get that. And, obviously they're 18, and that's completely normal. But he, was very methodical about his process. He was very honed in on what he wanted. He knew what he wanted. He stuck to it. He didn't let anybody influence his decision beyond him and his mother. And he, obviously saw a great fit at Purdue very early in the process and saw it all the way through. And, this wasn't a straight line in recruiting. There was a time there where I don't even think Purdue could have taken him because you only had 2 scholarships and you already had a forward, and things had to change here. Things had to change for both Purdue's projection to Kaufman and to Caleb First. And that would have been a knockout punch for a lot of kids with Purdue, but it speaks to what resonated with him about Purdue. He saw comfort, he saw fit, he saw an academic opportunity, he saw a great relationship with the coaches and all of that stuff. He didn't see that stuff at other places, not naming names, but you know who I'm talking about. And he just felt the most comfortable with Purdue all along, and that never changed.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting next few years for Purdue's men's basketball program. All right, Tom and Brian, thank you for segment 1. And we'll be out just for programming notes on the site this weekend. We'll have our back to our Sunday conversation. We'll do that on Sunday, which is the day that you do a Sunday conversation. And then also some other content items, and obviously we'll be back to a game week next week, hopefully, as the Boilermakers will take on Northwestern. So, all right, guys, we'll take a short break, bring in Nate Barrett, and bring him in for segment 2 of Gold and Black Live. Bobby Buckets, Riddell will be on for segment 3, and we'll look forward to doing that. So stay tuned. We'll see you in 2 minutes on Gold and Black Live.